Welcome to our pod, and by that I mean on Wednesdays we read. I'm Hannah.
I'm Laura.
And we are two best friends who do a deep dive into a new book series, one book at a time. Right now we are in the Murderbot Diaries, and we are discussing the characters of Artificial Condition, book 2 in the series. But before we get into that, Laura, what are you reading, watching, and or enjoying?
Okay, so Hannah, I loved A Psalm for the Wild Built.
Yes, you did.
So I immediately had to go out and get immediately. I had to go get A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers. It is just as sweet and nice as A Psalm for the Wild Built. I think that they both now have a special place in my heart, and I'm curious. I hope that there are more of these. I am thinking so that this is just going to be kind of a little novella series, but the book is dedicated for anybody who doesn't know where they're going. And I just love these dedications, and I love how they really fit with the novella themselves. Yeah. But this was a really sweet second part of the story of the monk and robot. And we're following Sibling Dex and Mosscap the robot as they try to figure out what do humans need. Uh-huh. And through this book, Sibling Dex is kind of discovering more about themselves and what they need. And maybe they aren't content with what they were doing and what they thought they needed to do. And Mosscap's kind of discovering some things of its own. And I just love these books so much, and I am so excited to read more of them. And I honestly wish they were longer, but this just little chunk of a novella is so nice to read. I highly recommend them to anyone who just wants a cozy book that makes you feel good and makes you think and makes you just feel like it's okay to be, it's okay to not know.
Can you describe the two characters, or surmise their character, like who they are in the book for the
Sure.
listeners?
So this is like a monk and robot book is what the series are called. And it follows Sibling Dex, who they are a tea monk. And it's a situation where robots have fled this world of Panga, and they have gone to the wild. And Sibling Dex in the previous book was kind of on a journey to figure out where they wanted to be, what they should be doing, what their purpose was. Okay. And in that journey, they wanted to, hear crickets. And so they became a tea monk and started serving other people, and they really liked their job as a tea monk. It was almost kind of like a situation where people would go and they would talk with them, and they would make tea based on what they were dealing with in their life, which is actually a really beautiful thing and seems like a really unique and neat job to just have people go to you and talk about what's going on in your life. If you're dealing with a hard thing at work or something new coming up, or maybe you're not dealing with anything, you're just being, and they would make tea for the people that would come to their little wagon, and then they would move on to the next place and the next place, and they would kind of just do this as they needed to move on to each town or whatever.
Yeah.
But they never really felt fulfilled. So they attempted this is all very spoilery for the entire series.
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, you could just say this is what they are. I didn't intend for you to get into spoilers. I'm sorry.
This is very spoilery, but I'm not gonna worry about it because I want people to read it, and I don't think that it'll really ruin things for people necessarily. But so then they end up going into the wild to try and hear some crickets, and they encounter Mosscap, who is a robot that robots have not been seen by humans for many, many years. And they end up kind of traveling together, and Mosscap's on a journey from the robots as a delegate for them to figure out what humans need. And so in the first book, they go on a journey together, and it's more kind of based around helping Sibling Dex find something. And the second book is more of a journey to help Mosscap
Oh.
kind of reunite with humans and figure out what do humans need. So they're traveling around to different places and interacting with humans. And there's a lot of funny, cute moments. And you see the relationship between sibling Dex and Mosscap kind of change and grow, and how they become more comfortable with each other and also protective of each other. It's very, very sweet. So I would highly recommend this book. It's a very different kind of science fiction.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's futuristic and you're dealing with obviously like robots and things like that. And but I would say I usually don't get the cozy vibes that I get from this book. I usually don't expect that from science fiction. So it's just a really nice book. People say that it's like drinking a cup of tea. I would agree. It's literally like a warm hug of a book, and it makes you feel better if you are kind of in a similar situation where you don't know where you're going or you just need a break. And I'd highly, highly recommend them. Very, very good books.
Okay. Have you been watching anything?
And I've been watching a show on Disney Plus, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Oh, you may have heard of it. It's a little weird thing, like with
what? Never heard of this before.
I've never heard of it before. Like I kind of remember someone mentioning that this existed, but I just can't. I don't know what it's about.
I think it's new, but there's shockingly a lot of content. No, I had seen all the Star Wars movies, and I wanted to watch some of the shows because everybody's been talking about the Mandalorian new season coming out in March, and I wanted to watch some of the shows. But I went and looked, and I was like, you know what? I'd kind of like to watch these in like order, like I was doing with Marvel. And Disney listed out like what's in order. So I was like, you know what? I'll watch those episodes 1 through 3, the movies, watch those. And you know what? Watching them this time around, I paid a lot more attention because I'm pretty sure when I had watched them previously that it was a situation where either other people had wanted to watch them or I was just kind of like there and like, oh yeah, we're watching these, and I didn't pay as much attention. And this time watching them, I was like really into it. And it was more of a fun experience too, because I'm watching these not trying to like be super critical of things that are going on, which is healthy for me at times to not be like, there's so many problematic moments in this, there's only one girl character and that kind of stuff. So it is kind of healthy for me every now and then to just watch a show and have fun with it, like I'm doing with this. But I watched those first 3 movies, and honestly, I'm very into it watching it this time around because I'm like, the complicatedness of the characters is so well done. It's so well done. And Anakin Skywalker is possibly becoming like one of my favorite characters ever, just because it's so his story is so perfectly complicated and tragic. He's easily in my mind one of the most iconic villains, and it completely makes sense and becomes so tragic when you have the backstory tied in there with those first 3 episodes.
Interesting.
So I started watching Obi-Wan Kenobi. Also, let me just say, the people that I have on Bookstagram are not very helpful when it comes to Star Wars questions, and I was expecting more of a turnout, but I asked because I'm watching these in timeline order, and after you watch like the first 3 movies, they have a couple of animated series, and I was like, do I need to watch these? Because, you know, I honestly was like, the animation doesn't look that good in them. I'm like, am I going to be into it? I'm not feeling them at the moment, so maybe not. So I was just like, do I need to watch these animated series? Do I need to watch Clone Wars? Do I need to watch Bad Batch? Do I need to watch Rebels? Let me know. And only one person answered. Thank you, Helena G. Reeds, for being a Star Wars expert and also having good book recs. But for being my Star Wars expert and telling me that they're just for fun, but it's not necessary. And I really appreciated that info. So I probably will watch them at some point, but there's just like so many episodes of them that it's kind of ridiculous. But anyways, I started Obi-Wan Kenobi then.
That's
and
good.
It is a really good show. I don't think the Rotten Tomatoes score was that high, but you know what? screw you, Rotten Tomatoes.
Star Wars is like one of those things that you can't touch it because people are always dissatisfied. I will say I have heard that Clone Wars, one of the characters on Clone Wars that you see, like it helps give specific context on what the Clone Wars actually were that they do in the prequel episode. Like the beginning of the Clone Wars is one of the episodes or whatever.
In the Disney shows or in the movies?
In the movies. One of the characters in the Clone Wars becomes one of the characters on one of the television series, or she pops up or something.
I think I know what you're talking about. The context is that it's a apprentice situation that appears again, I think in The Mandalorian.
Okay.
If I'm remembering right. But I think then again, right. I'm not for positive on this. So I'm sure people will call me out if I say it on here, if I get something wrong.
I'm sure we're gonna get people being like, "Oh my gosh, you like Obi-Wan Kenobi?"
But then again, nobody responded to my question. Should I watch these? So maybe we'll never hear anything. But no, I thought Obi-Wan Kenobi was really good. Ewan McGregor really. I mean,
I'm McGregor.
Ewan McGregor can get it. I love Ewan McGregor, and I thought it was just a really good show. The little girl that they had playing Leia, they really should have looked for some of the Netflix cast because the little girl they had playing Leia, she was doing good, but it was definitely a situation where I felt like I was getting a little too much from her at times when I was like, she's trying very hard to act.
Oh, poor kid.
It's fine. She's like 6.
Yeah.
But she did good, but I did feel at times where I was like, I feel like sometimes the Netflix actors that they get, the child actors, are very, very good.
Right.
And I don't know how they were able to get that crop of talent, but they usually do. And it blows my mind that other shows cannot do this. Other streaming networks cannot do this as well. But Netflix is very good at it. And they should have tried to get into that talent pool for Obi-Wan for the part of Leia.
Yeah.
But she did very good. I'm not knocking a 6-year-old too much, but the show was really good. I was really into it, and I'm excited to start Andor because that would be next. Because I'm not going through the animated stuff at the moment, but Andor is next on my list, and I'm excited for that. But Obi-Wan, I loved. I wish it was more than 6 episodes because I really dug it. It was good. And again, it may just be me like being so obsessed with the Anakin storyline that I'm just like, Obi-Wan is such a good show.
Yeah.
Because it definitely played into the relationship between Master and Padawan and how complicated it was at the end there and how resentful Anakin was of Obi-Wan and did not understand Obi-Wan's motivations and how Obi-Wan really did not understand Anakin's motivations or what was going on with him at the time either, and was pretty dismissive of his feelings throughout like the training earlier episodes. So highly recommend it. Do not be too critical of this stuff, guys. Like,
I mean, it's just Star Wars.
Fun. It's just technically
fun. Is
Obi-Wan, I think it's pretty well written, honestly. I don't know. Maybe I don't know about
Is Obi-Wan one of the more mature series? Because I know some series are more mature than others, and like because the television, like the Clone Wars and the original episodes, they're technically made for children.
Sure, yeah, those I think are targeted at children. The animated ones, these I'd say, but I don't know. I feel like adults can easily enjoy the animated ones too. These I'd say would be more so targeted at adults.
Okay.
I wasn't just sure guessing
because like I know that there's a whole have you ever heard the Freddie Prinze Jr. rant? We may have talked about this on the podcast before.
I think we have before.
Yeah, where he's like, these stories are made for children. Like they're not made for adults. Adults are allowed to enjoy them, but it's kind of like our YA discussions about like don't want mature content in your YA because it is made for children. You know, it's not made for you.
I would almost argue though that Star Wars, in my mind, just because of the themes and the relationships between the characters, is more of an adult series than other things of this nature, just because I do not feel like children are going to take away some of the complexities that are being brought in between like the Empire and like or just a more basic level, the Sith versus the Jedi. I don't think that they're going to understand necessarily why some people would feel conflicted and want to turn to the dark side, or get wrapped up in the Empire, or why people would want to seek out power like that. I think little kids almost in my mind would think of it as more of like a black and white situation. Like there's the bad guys, there's the good guys. Yeah. And I really think it's more complex, especially when we get into like Palpatine and some of Palpatine's motivations. So to me, I think Star Wars, and this is definitely just because I'm like so into it right now, but I think it's more of an adult series because it seems more complex. Okay. And yeah, but I think the writing is really good too. And this is just me, but there could be people that think the writing is terrible. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm excited for Andor. If anybody wants to talk about Star Wars with me, reach out to me on Instagram, Good Books, Great Goats. I would love to talk Star Wars.
Love it.
Hannah, what have you been reading and watching?
Okay, so I finished 2 thrillers via audio, so I've been on an audio thriller kick, and I did not like either of them.
Okay. Cool.
I did The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. As we know, Simone St. James is the book, the like author I'm using to get into like more
like the Sundown Motel,
stories.
Right?
Yeah. And so I think this one came out first from like the books that have been super big for her, because she's written 9 books, but really she became big with the Sundown Motel and the Book of Cold Cases. And I read the Book of Cold Case, or I've listened to them all via audiobook. They all have some spookiness, some ghosts and everything. But I liked the Book of Cold Cases quite a bit. And then the Sundown Motel, I gave like 3 stars. And then the Broken Girls, I gave 2 stars, because like they're all pretty similar and they have diminishing returns for me, where like it's always like a woman who isn't really all that special, but something bad happened to her. So in this particular one, it's like her sister was murdered when they were children. And now she's an adult and she's questioning if the guy who got put away was really the murderer. And the sister was like put on a field and like left. And then you find out like the history of this place. And there was like, it's a haunted school, and like girls were there in the 1960s or whatever, And so there's like a whole mystery of like what happened. They find a body from the 1960s on the field, like at the beginning of the novel. And then it's like what happened to this girl versus what happened to her sister. And honestly, by the end of the book, I was like, this pacing is really weird. I didn't enjoy the pacing. I thought there wasn't enough setup for some of the payoffs. And like there were moments where like she goes to dinner with her boyfriend, who is a cop, and his daddy was the chief of police when her sister was found. And
the guy, Blue Buds?
I know. And like his dad, they go to have dinner with the daddy, even though like she doesn't like the dad, but they kind of don't always explain why. It's just kind of like there.
And like, they don't like him.
She doesn't like him. And then the dad like sitting there at dinner, and like apropos of nothing, he's like, well, he should break up with you. And that guy who got put away for your sister's murder, like he was a good guy. He got railroaded. And I was like, what? This is confusing. Why is this happening? And I honestly didn't understand. And maybe I just wasn't listening to the book enough. But like by the end, I was like, what just happened? Like this was so rushed at the end. And like it's almost like the author was like, well, I don't want her to be super invested in finding out about her sister's murder. So she's just going to kind of fall into what happened, really. And it's like, this is weird. And then like someone follows her across state lines to tell her something. And I'm like, that makes 0 sense on why that's happening. I'm like, there's not enough reason for this book. And I just didn't particularly like it versus the Sundown Motel, which also felt a little weird in places. And the Book of Cold Cases was the best one I've read of her so far. And I'm like, I probably won't go any farther back than this. Like I might continue, but it seems like all of her past books that weren't as popular as the Sundown Motel and the Book of Cold Cases, like it sounds like I wouldn't like any of those, because they're almost like Simone St. James. Like when I first read the Book of Cold Cases, I'm like, oh, this is cool, because like a murder mystery mixed in with some like themes of ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
And as I get farther back, it's like less and less about the mystery and more about the ghosts. And I'm like, I don't like ghosts, so this doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm wondering, is it like the way you're describing it, it sounds like the author has kind of like got a good idea that they came up with, and they like ran with that idea, and then they were trying to figure out how to flesh it out, and they were like, let's try this. And it's just like, this doesn't really kind of add as much substance as it needed to.
Yeah. And like, it was interesting to be like, it just needed more hints for it to be there, where it felt like she definitely wanted it to be like the shocking ending. And I was like, it didn't need to be. Like, there's enough subterfuge. And in the last like final scenes, like small spoilers, the main character has the flu. So she's like fevered and talking to someone. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, why is this happening? Why does she have the flu suddenly? And it's like, I guess because she's supposed to be overworked, but like she's sitting there like talking to someone outside with the flu and a fever, being like, do you know what happened to my sister? And it's just like, what the heck is going on? I was so confused. Yeah. And then like you find out like what happened, and you're just like, okay, but like, why was she running around with the flu? Like, it's a way to get her like off edge and like not as able to fight back and stuff. But it also made zero sense.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, this came out of nowhere. What are you talking about? Why does she have the flu? Like, I just,
what a random thing to add in.
I'm like, I don't know. And I mean, I really like parts of this novel. And I was like, well, parts of me want to give it 3 stars because I liked those parts, but they weren't enough to make it better. Sure. And she has like a similar shock ending in all of her books that I'm like, dear God.
I do think that this is a thing too with authors where their books become very similar. Props to Nora Roberts for not falling into this trap.
Yeah.
But most authors, I think, have a hard time getting out of their little trench that they fall in with writing, and they kind of make their books very, very, very similar. Even though they're about different things, you can kind of call endings like, oh, I think I know what's going to happen, because in their other book, even though they're totally unrelated and in different worlds, this happened.
Right. And so like, I like the Book of Cold Cases kind of did that, where like, and again with like similar like not special women. Like in the Book of Cold Cases, the main character was abducted for like all of 15 seconds. And like she just remembers being abducted and how that changed her, and how she's like never been able to move on from that. So she runs this blog about cold cases.
Sure.
And in this book, it's my sister died and she was thrown on this field. And then Sundown Motel, it's a woman going to find out about her aunt who disappeared. And so it's like all these very unspecial women who like had something special happen to them. And that's why they don't have a personality, and they have like no personality traits. And it's just like,
this is also a thing that's common in thrillers, I feel like, where it's like, we're going to base this around this woman, but she is boring. Right. And you're like, okay, but why do we care?
Right. And that's like the Sundown Motel. I remember I cared so much less because like people kept being like, oh, these men are all obsessed with you. And I'm like, but why? Why do these men find this woman interesting? Nothing about her is interesting. Sure. Like she is bland as bland can be. So like it was, I just didn't like that book. And I also with my random, just lots and lots of stuff. Laura's favorite author is coming back, Megan Miranda, the girl from Widow Hills. I gave it 3 stars. Dedicated. I gave it 3 stars. I liked it. I like the woman from Widow Hills. Like she also has something random happen. So like the one from Widow Hills is about like this girl who, when she was younger, she like fell into a water system, and she went missing for 3 days, and then she was found.
I don't like that.
And like she has really no memory of it, but like as she grew up, she decided to like get out of the spotlight and like changed her name. And like she found out recently that her mother died, and her mom had like addiction issues after like all the fame and everything, and all this stuff happened. And then like she starts sleepwalking again, which is how she fell in the well originally, was through sleepwalking.
Oh gosh.
And she's like trying to figure out what happened to her. And then someone gets murdered outside of her house while she was sleepwalking. And she's like trying to figure out what happened. And that one was much more effective at like a little bit more shock value, a little bit more of like, what's happening? And like some of the things were incredibly guessable. But honestly, sometimes I prefer books that are a little bit more incredibly guessable when it comes to a thriller, because then you at least get to see the motions of her figuring it out. And then
at times it makes it more realistic
Yeah.
versus where it's like, wow, I never would have guessed that. And it's like, yeah, because that never would have happened.
Right. And like I've kind of gotten sick of the thrillers having to be like, and like there was one thing where I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. That was surprising to me. But like some of it, I was like, okay, I'm just waiting for her to figure it out, because like I've already figured this part out. And I do think that that makes a more effective thriller and mystery, because too many people try to do the Gone Girl of it all now, where they keep trying to ramp up the surprise, and like at some point ramping up farther surprises is not effective. Like that's why people go back to Agatha Christie. That's why people prefer old school mysteries, like because they don't mind like simple effective storytelling. And I feel like people have gotten away with that, like after Gone Girl, where they're like, I have to do this. And like Megan Miranda works best when it's not like all the missing girls, but like the woman from Whittle Hills, like this is about a girl who like suffered a tragedy, and then like now something's happening to her where she's now questioning like what's going on, you know? So
I love that you pointed that out though, because somebody on Bookstagram, I can't remember who it was, but they read a lot of thrillers. I'm sorry, there's a lot of construction going on in my house, so there's background noise here. But anyways, there was somebody on Bookstagram, can't remember who it was. They usually read thrillers, I think, but they picked up a Christie novel and they were like, why do people like these so much? And I get what they're saying, because they were having problems with the problematicness of the books, because Agatha Christie
she be problematic,
very problematic, is very problematic, but was also like of a certain time and everything, not an excuse. But it is like you're saying though, that people prefer to, I shouldn't say prefer, people sometimes like to have just good storytelling and have like a systematic way that things happen. And as long as the story is written well, people dig it. It doesn't have to be all these flashy things happening. And that's what Agatha Christie books are usually like. It's like all of this could actually happen usually. Like, and it's nothing that's like totally like, oh my gosh, I never thought that we were in an alternate dimension or whatever. Like, you know, so it's interesting that you pointed that out, because I have been thinking about that a lot recently, because I was thinking about like how my reading has kind of shifted. And I used like when I kind of got back into reading after college, I read several thrillers. But then I got burnt out really quick, as I've mentioned on here. And I think that I'm someone who just prefers more of the Christie style, where it's like, I just want some good writing and I don't need to have all the shock factor. If I want the shock factor, honestly, I prefer it in fantasy.
Well, because then it's at least dealing with like the shock factor has to do with like a theme, where like a thriller is just supposed to jump scare. And it's like, this isn't making me like jump scare. It's just making me like frustrated. So I do like I've been picking up a few more thrillers recently, but I've been doing like certain ones that are more popular, because I feel like those are at least better written than a lot of the like, you know, like not as popular. So like Megan Miranda, All the Missing Girls was not good. I remember reading that book and disliking it. But the other book she's written, I'm like, oh, these aren't so bad once you know what to expect. And then the Simone St. James, I was like less impressed, because I was just like, this isn't very good. Like it's just the same thing over and over again. So, and then Lisa Jewell, she was the one who dealt with like
the family upstairs.
I didn't do the family upstairs,
I did
I did do the hoarding book, and I enjoyed the hoarding book, you know.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah. So there are just certain ones where it's like, but then onto bigger and better things. I started this book last night that I'm going to talk about now, because I already know I'm going to adore it. It's like YA romance. And it's called The Love Match. And this book so much. It's called The Love Match by Priyanka Taslim. And it is about a Bangladeshi girl who recently lost her father, and after they lost their dad, they like lost a specific source of income. So they're struggling financially, but like they're technically they have like they're from a certain area in Bangladesh that is known to have like royalty there. So they are known to come from like a royal lineage. So they have a good name for themselves. They just don't have, but it's like the beginning prompt of the novel is like, you know, having a royal name doesn't give you money for apartment for an apartment. And so
sure, it's like they don't really get any of the privilege, but
like yes, it's like
they're still privileged.
They're still privileged because like people when they go to a wedding, like
recognize them, that kind of stuff.
Yes, that kind of stuff. And so
it's more of a recognition and getting like ahead in line, that type of thing.
And her mom ends up setting her up with this like rich restaurant owner's son for like an arranged marriage. And the restaurant owner's son and her decide to fake date so that they can just get their moms off their back. And
love a good fake date.
And then she's falling in love with like the dishwasher who works at the restaurant she works at. And so it's all about these like complicated feelings she starts having for these boys. But I just love this book so much. And it like something I loved about Miss Marvel was it got into the history of like India and the partition war that went on. That partitioned off Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. And this book deals with that because it talks about like she worked for a Pakistani restaurant in New Jersey where there is a high and like fluctuation of like Bangladeshi people and Pakistani people, similar to Miss Marvel that was also located in New Jersey. And it kind of just goes into the history of that from like a different perspective of Miss Marvel because Miss Marvel was Pakistani American and she is Bangladeshi American.
Okay.
And so it kind of just goes into the different like cultures and like makes like specific jokes. And I just love that like there are books like this now and like that awesome. Talk more about this. And
the good thing about that is that might be somebody's first exposure into that type of history. So props to that author for kind of bridging the gap and bringing that to people in a really accessible way, because that's happened to me before in books that I'll read about something in fictional books that I'll read about something and think, oh wow, did that actually happen? Is that a thing? And I'll look it up and like find more context on it. So people will do that, and good on that author.
Right. And I recently saw like a TikToker who was talking about how like, hey, Miss Marvel was really important because like no one knows about the partition war and like no one knows that this happened in America because we don't teach about it because it was a huge issue with British imperialism. And guess what happens when that kind of stuff is what like creates a war? It's not going to be covered as much. So like these types of works are super important. I love that it's just mainstreaming it. I love that like it's also talking about arranged marriages because that still happens with certain like cultures and everything. And they like talk about at the beginning, they're like, oh, they attend a love match wedding. And they're like, oh, but you know, that has a high divorce rate. And the girl sitting there like, we have a high divorce rate because women are finally just divorcing bad men. Like, so like, they're talking about like culture differences and like all these like, you know, aunties and everything getting involved with everything. And it talks about like how close their family is and like how she's helping like her siblings. And it's dealing with stuff like wanting to go to college, but knowing you have to take care of your family and like being the oldest child when it comes to this stuff. And so, and it's also just so funny because you're reading about it and you'll find like certain things where like her mom makes dresses, but her mom doesn't want her to become a writer because it's not an approved career. And it's like, but your mom technically works in like an artistic field. She works in fashion, but she doesn't see that as a career for her daughter because her daughter's supposed to do better than she does, you know? So it's like,
it's also interesting how like, even within certain like careers, there's almost like gatekeeping within them. Like, so that, you know, we would both call it art, but I would say even like more condensed, people would say like if you wanted to get into fashion design and just like come up with new outfits, people would be like, don't do that. But they'd be okay if you were like, I'm a seamstress or a tailor.
And
like,
that's the thing, her mom is a seamstress / tailor, and so it's like more palatable for the mom to be like, I have this job, but I don't want you to have this job. You're supposed to be better than me,
right?
And like this inherent like Americanized version of like you have to keep certain things but let go of certain things. And I'm just like, I'm only 20 pages into this book, so I honestly have no clue what happens with the romance. I just love the beginning and the scene setting of this book.
Sure.
And like there's a moment where they're at the tea shop and one of her friends like posts pictures of the tea on Instagram, and like this white person comes in and she's like, I want this tea. And she's like, oh, and she like goes to tell her like it's incredibly bitter. Like, yes, it looks pretty, but like this is known for its bitterness. It's kind of like drinking salty tea. And like her mom comes in, so she's not able to like deter this woman, and then the woman's like, you're gonna hear about this on Yelp, and I'm like, I can totally see that happening. Like, and she's just like, I should have talked her out of it, like, damn it, like I can't do this right now. And so I'm just obsessed with this book so far. I got it from Simon and Schuster's book club favorites. Okay. So I'm so glad they sent it to me. I just think people should pick up this book. It's so cute.
Okay,
so
cool.
I'll let you borrow it after I'm done.
Okay,
cool. But then for watching, I watched Wendell and Wild last night. It's on Netflix. It is by Henry Selick, who made Nightmare Before Christmas. Okay. It's a stop motion animated horror comedy film starring Jordan Peele and Keegan-Michael Key.
My fave.
As these two demons who like want to escape hell so that they can make their own amusement park, because their dad runs an amusement park in hell, and they tried to make their own stuff, and their dad like put them in prison, which is just on his head for the rest of their lives for treason. It's a very bizarre movie that has like way too much going on, but they want to escape to make their own theme park, and then they find out that they've been assigned to a hell maiden who can summon them to earth. And you find out that this hell maiden is this girl who lost her parents when she was very young, and she's had a lot of like struggles, and she has to return back to her old hometown to like join this boarding school after being in juvenile hall for like a second chance. And she goes back, and it's like all run down now, and it's owned by this evil corporation. And it's like, she really wants to bring her parents back, and she finds out there is a possible way of doing that if she summons the demons. So she decides to summon them up. And it's exactly as
the best
weird
demons possible.
And it's exactly as weird as you think the guy who created Nightmare Before Christmas would be. I can say that like I wasn't a huge Nightmare Before Christmas fan when I watched it. Like I watched it too old. But honestly, I very much enjoyed this movie. I thought it was very cute. There was way too much going on. I think my boyfriend and I said we give it a B+. Okay. Just because it's so freaking cute. The stop motion is amazing. Like they made this during the pandemic, and it took them like over 2 years to make this. And like people just making, like you can really see the artistry and how this like movie was created. And it's so cute. Like there are so many funny things. Like at one point, like the daughter of the evil corporation, like it's like, oh, my parents want to build prison facilities where they will rehabilitate people and like get them back into society as better persons. And like the main character, Kat, is like, so you've never been to a prison before?
Oh no.
It deals with very specific themes that are very good, and it's a little bit darker, and I think it's rated PG-13, which means like it's even like a little bit more brutal than Nightmare Before Christmas was allowed to be. But I was really impressed with this movie. I thought like Jordan Peele helped Henry Selick made it, so like the storytelling is a little bit more concentrated. He also made Coraline, so if that tells you anything. So like very good themes, very interesting work. And I liked it a lot. I thought it was like very good. It was very like diverse. So there's like a main character who's attending this all-girl school who is transgender, and like they deal with him really well. And like one of them dead names and then immediately apologizes. And then like there are moments on the phone where like the mom is talking to someone and she's like, well, I need this job for my son. And she goes, no, I have a son now. And I'm like, oh, that's so impressive to like see a mom just like support their child. And like, she's just like fully on board, and he's amazing. And he's super sweet and kind. And like, he used to be one of the popular people. And then he was like, oh, well, when I decided to be different, it was just harder. And I realized I didn't want to fit in with the world they had built me. And I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. And it's about grief and like letting go of your parents. And like, it's also just weird. Like they bring people back to life with hair cream that they were using on their dad's head. It's a very bizarre movie, but honestly, go watch it if you want something like new and different. So
definitely have to check that out.
It's on Netflix. So, and Henry Selick said that he loves Netflix because like they just kind of let him run wild, and sometimes he gets
honestly, I think Netflix a lot of times just is like, let's throw something at the wall and see if it sticks.
And so I hope like people watch it, because I do want him to make more stuff similar to this, because it was fun. I like have this weird relationship with stop motion and like similarly animated things, because like I have a deep obsession with The Corpse Bride that I cannot articulate, but I don't love Nightmare Before Christmas.
See, I am a big chicken, so as a child, I was very scared of The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Okay.
So similar to like other people have, on Bookstagram have been like, you should read Animorphs, and I was like, I'm terrified of them. I can't.
Children who turn into animals?
I'm like, I remember those covers; they were terrifying.
Funny.
I cannot. But yeah, I remember being very afraid of Nightmare Before Christmas. Now, as an adult, I listen to a lot of Disney music, so I do like a lot of the Nightmare Before Christmas songs. But I do not think I can watch it because I'm such a chicken.
I wouldn't say that it's very scary though. Like, it's bizarre.
Is Corpse Bride scary?
No, like it's one of those things, like I was able to deal with it, and it's like it's not really scary. It's just like it does have like undead, or it has like the undead in it, or dead people in it. Like, it's not super terrifying. It's just like bizarre almost.
And let me just say, like, I probably could watch it and not be like, oh my gosh, I'm terrified. But I'm just remembering being a little kid and being like, that is too scary for me. And now as an adult, I'm just not as into scary things. So
I mean, I'm not into scary things either. I would put it up with like Gremlins, where it could be scary if you like squinted at it. Like, but it's not actually.
I mean,
scary.
Gremlins is pretty realistic. So
I mean, it's a Christmas film, that's for sure.
The joy of the season.
Gremlin Christmas carolers. How did they know what Christmas caroling was? It still boggles my mind.
They have a understanding of the world that we could never understand. Did you watch The Pale Blue Eye on Netflix?
No.
With Christian Bale and Harry Melling?
No. What is that about?
My husband and I watched that. It's like a murder mystery type thing.
Yeah, that was the one that was like out in theaters, but like no one knew it existed.
Yeah. Well, we didn't know about it until Netflix very carefully picked pieces of the movie to make the little credit thing at the beginning, where they're like, you should watch this. And it was okay.
Yeah.
Our favorite
Saoirse Ronan in it?
I don't
Saoirse Ronan.
I don't think she's in it.
Oh, maybe that's a different one.
No, Harry Melling, who you would know from like The Queen's Gambit or as Dudley Dursley in the Harry Potter movies. Robert Duvall plays a small part in this. Gillian Anderson is great. Timothy Spall is in it. Christian Bale and Harry Melling, though, are like the main characters. And there's been a series of murders that have occurred across military campus, and Harry Melling plays Edgar Allan Poe. And the portrayal of Edgar Allan Poe is very unique. And you kind of want to just give him a hug. And I thought he did a great job. He deserves an award for his acting. He's a very good actor. I was very shocked because honestly, I've only really seen him in the Harry Potter movies and then in The Queen's Gambit, so I don't really have a lot of exposure to his acting.
Yeah.
And then Christian Bale is everything you would expect.
I mean,
of Christian Bale.
He's Christian Baling all over the place.
He is Christian Baling everywhere.
He is so serious about this movie, you wouldn't believe it.
Yeah, he went all out. But
I was thinking of See How They Run, which is also a movie that like barely existed. So
no, this one was good. It was one that I think I probably should have started it earlier in the evening because I was like falling asleep towards the end. But I was just very tired and it was like midnight. But it was pretty good. I really think, though, my favorite part of it was just Harry Melling's portrayal of Edgar Allan Poe, because it was something that like I did not expect. I was like, oh, he is like really sweet and nice and caring, and I just didn't think that was a thing. So I always kind of just think of like Edgar Allan Poe being like this dark, mysterious person himself. So
nice.
Yeah, but know. It's an interesting way that it goes around through this plot. I don't know how to describe it well enough without like spoiling it, but weird things do happen, and there are situations where you're like, why is this person obsessed with this other person? Makes no sense. But it's interesting. I don't know if it's a movie for everyone, but I didn't hate it by any means. So
good to know. I like it. Okay.
Sometimes Netflix gets some gems like that.
Yeah, I know. Netflix, we're Netflix stands over here, except for their whole business model. But other than that,
except for canceling Julie and the Phantoms.
oh my goodness. I just don't understand why they
I love
cancel.
every time I go to one of Netflix posts in the comments, people will say, bring back Julie and the Phantoms.
Because I mean, it's almost like the kids are a little bit too old now. Like the time has passed. I'm so
I
sorry
know.
to everyone who thinks
They'd have
that
to
you should bring
recast
it back.
it, but
They would have to recast it.
It just makes me laugh that people will not let it go, that they're still like, can you imagine being the social media manager for Netflix and be like, oh my gosh, 4,000 comments that say bring back Julie and the Phantoms.
Oh, it's because it was a freaking good show and they just let it die, Laura.
I know. It just makes me smile when I see all those comments.
I know. All right, should we dive in or fly in on
Let's do it.
Who would you like to start with today, Laura?
I mean, I have just like a lot of topics.
Okay,
I wrote down.
Okay, let's do topics.
So the first thing I wrote down was just like the movie title. Fear is an artificial condition, and you should do the things you are most afraid of. And I was like thinking about that, like, should you do all the things you're afraid of? Because Murderbot initially was just like, no, you don't do the things you're afraid of. But then there's also just like this human desire to be like, yeah, you need to do things that you're afraid of, because sometimes people are afraid of dumb things. Like myself, I'm afraid of dumb things. Like, oh, I don't want to go to this, but then it's like, oh no, that could be actually a really good experience for you and you can make friends. So I just thought that was something interesting to bring up, like just the movie title, the book title.
Hey, that's the name of the book.
Working in the book title, because that was mentioned in there. And I thought that maybe, I was just trying to make that like one of the themes of the book, that Murderbot is actually doing things that Murderbot is afraid of, like interacting with humans and trying to figure out things about its past.
Well, and I think that like Murderbot, it's kind of goes back to what you're saying with like human condition, like what is good fear versus what is bad fear. Because like good fear is like, it's supposed to keep you alive. Like good fear is like, hey, don't go into that dark building, there's going to be a murder in there. Like, and it's not like jump off this building with no safety precautions, because no fear. Like there is a different type of fear, and then there's like fear anxiety, which is like, well, if I go, then I'll have to talk to people, and I hate talking to people because I hate thinking about what they think about me. Do they find me interesting? Do they? And it's just like, well, that's not really, that's just like fear is a feeling. You don't need that fear, because like you're fine, you're just a person existing, and that's good enough. And so I do think that there's like a certain amounts of Murderbot where Murderbot is someone who like is doing things that it very much fears, where it's like trying to interact with people. It's trying to be around people because it knows how most people feel about it, and it hates knowing that feeling.
Yeah.
But there's like, that's a good fear to try to like expand your circle, because Murderbot feels very validated by the people around it. And Murderbot is starting to feel more and more like its own humanity, if we go back to the terms I've been using, which are probably not like the perfect terms for this. So if you have a better term, let me know. But like its own humanity is important to it, because like it's learning to like other people. It's learning to like itself through these scenarios. And it's expanding on its own world. So like that's the good, that's the fear to fight through so that you can learn from it. But in the context of what was happening, like it was with
it was a very specific situation.
It's with what's her name? Tapon, who Tapon is like, yeah, I got off the shuttle to get our stuff back. And Murderbot's like,
they tried to murder me once, but maybe not this time.
And Murderbot's like, that's the bad fear that you're supposed to stay away from.
You're supposed to ignore that one and go the other way. Like,
come on, work with me a little bit here. So like, I think that's the humor of the book, is like, it points out that like, hey, maybe not in that scenario, even though it might be helpful in other scenarios.
Well, and that kind of brings me into like one of the other things I wrote down, which was the struggle with identity, and how Murderbot throughout this, and Murderbot even says at one point that it has to pretend harder not to be a person.
Yeah.
Especially after the augmentation that it has, that Art does, that it's becoming even harder to kind of tuck away that human side of itself. And I think recognizing its fear and trying to dig into its past are very human things. And I even questioned, like, why does Murderbot care about its past? Like, why does it need to get into this? And why is it obsessed with finding out? Because if it didn't care, it would just move on and be like, I'm just going to go watch more Sanctuary Moon. I don't care about this. I'll go watch World Hoppers. It doesn't matter. But the fact that it's interested in its past and interested in helping others shows that it is struggling more and more with its identity and kind of becoming more reconciled with the fact that it's got a lot of human qualities.
Yeah. And it is interesting. Like, there's so many things about Murderbot's humanity where it's like, oh, I have to work harder not to feel human, not to make the same mistakes I did. But like, there are certain mistakes it did make that it's not giving itself enough like credit for moving past, which is like, it made the mistake of murdering a bunch of people because it had faulty hardware or software downloaded into it that like it shouldn't have. And something happened to it where it didn't have the free will to decide differently for itself. And that in and of itself is like very horrifying and shows like Murderbot was capable of making like technical mistakes that were someone else's choice before. But like to Murderbot, it's kind of like it can disassociate itself. And then it comes with the like, well, what does free will give you? Because if you have free will, you have the humanity to mess up. And that is what Murderbot is learning, where Murderbot's like, I was not an effective security counsel because I have the free will to make choices, and I made choices for myself that may have been a mistake. And like, you can, it's just all about like what type of choice you can make and what's the better option for you in that moment.
And all of those play into like Murderbot's comments about liking itself too, where it says, yeah, I like parts of myself. And I think that you saying that about like, oh yeah, you like free will gives you choices and you can make choices. And you know what? Sometimes they're not always the best choices and you don't like that you made them. And then that kind of forms, well, not kind of, it does form who you are as a person. And you can look back and say, I don't like that I did that, but I still like parts of myself. I like that I help other people. I like that I have interests in TV shows. I like that I do this or that, but I do not like that I made that choice, and I do not like that this happened.
Yeah. And so I do think that this book is such like, there's such a good conversation about free will and what free will gives you, because like, if we look at the difference between like Murderbot versus Art versus the comfort unit we meet, and it's like the comfort unit wants to go out and murder everyone and wants revenge. And like, that is like technically because this comfort unit has free will because of what like Talasi did to its programming to like give it the opportunity to do these things. Like, it has to follow certain rules from Talasi, but it can work within those rules because of what Talasi did to it. Like, and its choices, like, I don't like that I'm not given the free will in all my choices. So my choice is to make everyone else pay for it. And Murderbot's like, well, that's not reasonable because not everyone did this to you. Like, yeah, people are misguided and people don't understand, but that doesn't mean that they're inherently bad. And then you have Art, who like has a little bit of free will whenever it's not around people, where it's like, well, I have to go to the ship, but like, well, I'm with myself, I get to do whatever I want. And like, there are certain parts where Murderbot doesn't really understand Art, where it's like, how does it have this much like power? Like, it doesn't make sense. But Art's like choice is just like, well, I want to learn more about the humans who ride with me, and I want to learn about like the reactions and what reaction I should be having to the world. And like, Art is more of the identity of like, I want to see the world and then experience it through other people or other beings, and then have some understanding of why I'm doing what I'm doing, and then I'll feel fulfilled. And then Murderbot is like, no, I just want to be left alone. Like, I
would argue though that Murderbot is equally fascinated with humans. I mean, Murderbot watches them on TV constantly, wants to like see what people are doing, and like in All Systems Red, Murderbot was watching other people's conversations to figure out like, oh, this one and that one, they're kind of flirty with each other, and these two I think are just friends. And so Murderbot is equally fascinated by humans. It just comes off in a different way, where I think Murderbot at this point tries to act more apathetic, whereas Art is maybe more designed to be serving. And Murderbot is a little more on the fence in terms of whether they genuinely like and approve of humans, or just have more of a understanding of how humans are.
That's a good point.
Because that's kind of how I feel about it, where it's like, at times I feel like Murderbot really likes humans and is fascinated by them, but at the same time it comes off to me as just like a Murderbot understands humans and how they work, and that they can be complicated and you don't have to like them. Yeah. But they are, and it's a thing where Murderbot's constantly watching and trying to learn more about them.
Well, and I do think that kind of goes to another point that I want to make about these books, which is the feelings of love you can have towards someone who doesn't love you back. And like Murderbot has genuine affection for a lot of people, but knows that people they don't reciprocate those feelings. So like Murderbot, and that's like seen through its conversation with Art about like television series, and how Murderbot can't watch how humans view murderbots or sec units, because there's a difference between escapist that's not realistic, that is harmful, versus unharmful. Like escapism can be unharmful, and that is okay to participate in. But the fact that like Murderbot's like identity is harmed by the way people view it, like, and it hurts its own self and like makes it dislike itself, because humans don't value what a sec unit feels and thinks and wants. Like it hurts Murderbot. And that's also like and something else that deals with those themes, they're not as perfectly tracked, but similar, is the conversation Murderbot has with Art, where Murderbot is like, well, lots of augmented humans walk like me, or they look like me, or they act differently. And Art goes, well, you don't have that luxury because you aren't one of them. And I think that is also very true if you look at like our world and the way people have to like tone police themselves to keep themselves safe. So like you are not allowed as much independence as you want in certain spaces for your own safety. Like as women, like there are much better examples, but just to speak personally for us, like as women, you and I can't go running on a dark street at night because we are not safe. So we have to keep ourselves safe that way. And every time I see a male runner at night, all I can think is like, wow, you get to do that. And I do not get to do that. And it's like, because of the body we were placed in, we have to act a certain way or be a certain way to keep ourselves safe. And that's what Art is getting at with Murderbot. And Murderbot's frustrated because it's like, well, then I have to lose like a certain part of myself that I didn't want to lose to keep myself
safe. It reminds
safe.
me of like chronic illness, how people have to deal with invisible illness. And when they're in public, they have to say, oh, I'm fine, or just put on a smile and go through their day, when they are in reality dealing with excruciating amount of pain or discomfort, and they have to go about their day and go to work and do this and this and this and this. And it's because society expects that of them. And it's maybe a situation where it's like, they need more rest. They need this, they need medication, and they're expected to just grin and bear it. And so it's interesting how you can apply the themes in this book to many different situations, because this is just scratching the surface of things that you could make examples of. But go ahead.
No, keep going.
I was also thinking though about like the perceptions that you have of yourself versus the perceptions that other people have of you, kind of tying into this, where Murderbot a lot of times feels very unique and like almost a self-serving, or not self-serving, but like a self-important type of way. Like nobody gets me. But then at the same time has it flipped where it feels sad in terms of nobody gets me. And it's interesting how it's true in both situations, where it's, and not always true, because there are times when, you know, like the comfort units, it doesn't recognize like, oh yeah, comfort units maybe could have some feelings too. But it's a situation where there are times where Murderbot is very misunderstood and nobody gets it. And there are times when Murderbot is misunderstood in a way that it's like, yeah, Murderbot's the only one that feels this way, and that's really unique and different. But still, there are looking at it from like more of a sad perspective,
Right.
that people don't understand Murderbot, and Murderbot has a perception of itself, and people see Murderbot in a very different way.
Mm-hmm. It's incredibly interesting because like I'm just so like in awe of how relevant all these feelings are for Murderbot.
Sure.
Like the fact that we can be like, oh, Murderbot wanting to exist in of itself and be special, but then feeling this deep sadness of I'm the only one who's like me, and then failing to see that there are similar like units and similar like augmented beings that feel similarly to Murderbot, and Murderbot didn't get that because like it only had its one perspective and hadn't seen outside of its own world. And I also like I wonder if later on in these books we're going to get into more about the like the ethics of the fact that like Murderbot had its memory tampered with. Because if you think about it, like Murderbot had this horrible thing happen that it is not allowed to understand what happened or when it happened. And there's like an ethical conclusion of like, did Murderbot always have this personality? And it just failed to remember it. So it felt like this was a unique situation for it, where it's like, oh, this iteration of myself feels that way.
I also wondered if it was a trauma response too, similar to what happens in people if something traumatic happens to them, that they can literally block out that memory.
Oh, okay.
And you know, years later can recall like, oh, something traumatic actually happened to me and I totally blocked it out because it was that traumatic, you know. So I wonder if maybe it's something like that too. Maybe it's probably more likely that it was a memory wipe situation where we're talking about consent issues and wondering, like you said, is this ethical to wipe someone's memory? But I did think of trauma responses that, you know, what if it was a glitch or something like that to that Murderbot had to like, we're going to wipe this because this is something we feel not okay with because it's so traumatic.
Right. Well, and that could be true too, even if it's like, even if it was the memory wipe of the company where Murderbot is just like more compliant with what happened, because if Murderbot did these things because Murderbot wasn't given a choice, like something bad happened to its own brain where its own consent to do something along the lines of like free will, its free will was taken away in that moment. It could have like probably not wanted to remember the fact that it can be so easily controlled. And that like gets dealt with where like one of the first things Murderbot wants augmented is the ability to lose its own self-control. And like that is so important to
has to have like that port put in, or that port disabled so that people can't just like go in and download this. There you go.
Right. And it's just so fascinating to like read more about. Yeah.
And it kind of gets back into like my question that I had at the beginning. Why does Murderbot care so much about what has happened in the past? This is one of the questions I'm just going to keep replaying as we go through this series. Like, why does Murderbot care so much? And hopefully we learn more about this. But it's interesting because as humans, we would be like, well, obviously you'd want to learn about your past. But it's like, why would Murderbot, you know, does Murderbot need to?
Right.
You know?
I know. It's fascinating to discuss.
Oh, for sure. What did you think about after Murderbot learned about what happened, how it went and watched Sanctuary Moon?
I mean, it goes back to like
charge and decompress.
Your trauma response of like, you and I specifically talk about moments of stress. Like literally I have to watch Law and Order if I'm not in a good mood anymore, because that was how I constructed my brain to feel comfort. And like if I use too much of that, it becomes too much of a crutch. But like there is a certain thing where like people who have anxiety find comfort in rewatching the same television show over and over again. And like it is a trauma response. It is like a response for anxiety. It's there to help people and be beneficial to them. And it's just another moment of us seeing Murderbot's humanity, where it's like, I need a minute. I need to help myself in this moment. And I need to like look inside to like feel comfort in something outside of my own body, because I cannot trust myself right now. And I think that that's wonderful to like see on the page for something that like gets, again, dehumanized by so many people. Like it's just such a human response that I just adored so much.
Yeah, I think what we're taking a lot from Murderbot in this book is how human it is.
Yes.
And I think those are the parts that probably most readers connect with, are the humanity that we see in Murderbot. And I have this quote that I wrote down from, I think it was Art that said it. Young humans can be impulsive. The trick is keeping them around long enough to become old humans. And I loved that because the interactions that we get between Art and Murderbot, I think, make this book so
God,
great.
so wonderful.
And it's funny how they both, we have already said, are in love with humans. They love humans and are fascinated by them, want to learn more about them. But at the same time, they're teaching each other about humans. And it's funny how they feed off of each other. And one of them will say, I don't understand why they were doing that. And the other one will say, well, obviously this. And then they'll kind of like share information with each other.
I know. I adore that so much. And like, it's so true. Because if you look at humanity, like it's always like old people telling young people what to do to not make their same mistakes, and young people being like, well, I want to make my own mistakes. And there is something to be said about that, because that's something like I appreciate as a youngish child. I value so much younger people needing to make their own mistakes and have their own experiences, because I think too many people get caught up on the like, well, I learned, so like you should value my learning. And I'm like, well, value their learning. Like, it's the same thing. You're devaluing them the way like they're devaluing you. So if we all just like let ourselves be and be our own person, who we're just focusing on ourselves and our own growth, wouldn't we be a little bit happier with the world if we weren't judging the ones that came after us so much? And like have a little bit of grace, because I often, like, my biggest thing is like old people, myself included, with young people get so like defensive, and it's just like, you know, that like you could just not care. Like not caring is an option. So like there are people who are like, a youth told me I couldn't have the side part, and I'm like, just have your side part. You're fine. Like, it doesn't matter if they're not screaming at you in the like street. You can probably just let it go. Yeah. And like I've said before, like, oh, I don't get wearing silk out. Like silk has made a comeback. And listen, I've tried to wear silk shirts. You see every drop of water that has fallen on them, and then they were ruined. But I'm like, if that's what's floating your boat, like you should be able to do it. Like I just but I value that with Art and Murderbot so much, where they're both learning from each other and both being like, well, you know, humans are stupid and they're impulsive, and we can see certain things they can't see. But then they also recognize like there are certain things that humans can see that they can't see, where Art is like, well, I have to watch you watching the television, because like, like I can't understand what's happening on the television. And like,
I need your reactions.
And then like Murderbot's first response to the comfort unit being like, let's murder everyone, was like, who would make the TV? Like, we can't do that. Like, so I really adore their relationships and like the themes that are getting talked about, that like there's so much to these books, and they're 180 pages or
they're really short
pages. Like blink and you'll miss it. So
what did you think about, so like there's so much we could say about Art and Murderbot interacting with each other that's just so wonderful and great, and we could go on and on about that, but I think we could just leave it at it being just a very lovable, growing, and supportive relationship with some snark. And I think that kind of sums it up. But did you think that Art was genuine, or do you think that maybe there's like some ulterior motives that we are not gonna know about? Because there were so many times where we're like given all this information about Art, and I didn't know if it was just like a plot witch situation where it's just like Art conveniently is able to do all these things. Art has all these things at its disposal. Art has all these things at its disposal that it can do to help Murderbot, or if it was a thing where it's like, this is maybe something we shouldn't be getting involved with, because why does it care about Murderbot, and is there something going on here?
So I kind of saw it more as like there is something more to Art. I don't think it's plot witch that Art can be like, oh, I have this like state-of-the-art medical thing that can change anyone's appearance, and I can do this, and I have like, I'm stacked with weaponry to like keep us safe and all this stuff. Like I think
I have a defense system.
Yeah. I'm not going to tell you what's in the defense system, but it's a good one. So I think that there's definitely something to Art. but I don't necessarily think it's bad, because I think art, like, it says that it comes from like educated people, and usually like educated people in these types of like stuff, like it wasn't put through the lens of like corporate stuff, which is usually how Murderbot shows evilness, is like corporations like taking from people who have contracts with them. Yeah, like this is a university, so we're so intelligent. But I kind of saw it more as like, we're going to find out like these people are probably like university people who value their equipment, who value the knowledge that comes with it, because the way like art speaks about humans is very much like, I take care of them because they take care of me, almost energy. And I love them because they have so much love for me. And I'm like, oh yeah, like usually people who value exploration and value the university and value study, like they would value a machine that is able to do that, or like, and so I was thinking more like art will come back into play, but art will always be like a beacon of like helpfulness. That's what I got.
I hope that's the situation, because this is just me not trusting anyone, that I was like, what if art's a bad guy?
No, not in this book.
Art's not a bad guy in this book. I'm just wondering, like, further down the line, if we come across art, I was just like, what if art is a bad guy? Because why would art have all this access to, and have this interest in Murderbot? I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
You are spooky for someone who doesn't like scary. That is very scary. Spooky
murder's scary in the title. Murderbot Diaries.
Yeah, but I really liked art. What did you think of the humans we saw mostly in this book?
Which ones specifically? We get more time with Tapon.
I know, that was kind of who I was thinking about.
I think Tapon kind of comes off to me as being kind of a sweet yet naive character, where it's they want to get their research back, they want to be helpful, but at the same time they're just not able to look at the situation from all angles and be like, this is dangerous, I'm bringing myself back into this. And I like I just mentioned, like, I have a difficult time trusting people for them to jump in and be like, I think that this person is going to actually help me. I would have been like, no, they're not going to help you. Run, turn around, keep driving, don't go back there. But luckily in that situation, it is a helpful interaction, and they do get the information back, but they come off very sweet, and I really like the cuddling that they do. That's really sweet to me. I love how Murderbot adjusted its temperatures so they could cuddle together to be comforting to Tapon. Yeah, they're the ones that you get the most exposure to. The other two, not as much. They're more accepting of Murderbot as their security guard, being like, this is not safe, you need to stay home. They're like, got it, we will listen to you because you are a professional.
I am very much a Tapon, where I'm like, look, I think it'd just be rude to show up with our own security person. Like, that is such Hannah energy, to be like, I just don't want to offend anyone, so I will bend over backwards to make myself unsafe in this situation. So I really liked her for that reason. I also like that she's also pretty bold. Like it's so human. Like it shows like humans are not rational beings. We will put ourselves in danger because we think like, I have a contract. And I do like that, like Murderbot's like, listen, we don't live in a place that like values contracts. I'm so sorry, they're not gonna do anything for you. I do love the world building of how like Martha Wells creates this world, and like creates like the fact that there is a ton of like polyamory, and you have like Rami who is like, it's like a being that like doesn't value feminine and male genders. Like they are just another being, and they are their own person, and like, or their own person. And I just really enjoy that type of world building. And I love that like Murderbot uses it pronouns. Like I really just think that this is effective world building, because it shows like a lot of sci-fi is still incredibly limiting, because a lot of it is like Eurocentric, a lot of it is like heteronormative, and that's just like something that happens like with the way society has progressed. But I really think Martha Wells does an effective job of looking at it and being like, hey, worlds out there probably don't look like our world and our Earth. Like this is a place that has like a being that has organic parts but is also like a unit, and that is like an effective way to story tell and just adds way more to the world in like its few short pages than I've read in a lot of other places.
For sure.
So I definitely loved that in this book that
I
Martha
also
Wells
think
kind of
that
took more
Martha
time.
Wells writes effective villains.
Yes.
Where we have Talisi in this one, and in a grander scheme of things, we have the company that controls the sec units being a villain. And because of reasons that we've previously talked about, consent and, you know, the ethical issues of it all when it comes to how they are using their units for X, Y, and Z. And also we have Grey Chris, is that what it's? I'm trying to remember. That was the situation in All Systems Red. I think it's Grey Chris.
I think you're right.
If I'm remembering right. Yeah, but they are trying to kill off all of Preservation Ox. But yeah, so in this book, I think the villain is really effective where you understand the motivations, you understand how they quickly want to just be like, oh, do you want a job with us? I kind of need somebody like you. If you'd like to come work for us, that would be great. And it's also a situation where I'm pretty sure Talisi is augmented, correct?
I don't know.
But you get a lot of the like vibes of, you don't get all the like super sinister, like twisting the mustache vibes that you would maybe get from some villains. You get more of a,
she is augmented.
Okay. You get more of a realistic situation where it's just like, no, I'm gonna make money off of this. That's what it's about. It's that simple. And I really like that Martha Wells can make things simple in those terms where it's just like Murderbot initially, or not initially, but it will right away say, no, the company would not do this because they would lose money. The company would not do that. It understands motivations for people. And I think we as readers can understand the villain's motivations fairly easily, and they make sense. And I like that about the writing.
Right. I really liked Talisi as like the bad guy in this, especially since she like is so ridiculous, and like a lot of her like faults are like Murderbot's like, no one ever suspects that sec units have this much power. They just think we're these beings that will accept whatever. And it's such a weird thing to like think an augmented or like thinking the sec unit would be motivated by money when it's like they
had no idea how much to charge.
Yeah, like they are not treated the same as you are. So like you are under this capitalistic system where money is the way you make everything. And like
profit by killing everybody and taking their stuff.
Right. And like screwing people over. And like Murderbot's not gonna know what that means. And like it's assuming that everyone lives under the same system you live under. And it's just so faulty and so funny to me that like Murderbot's just sitting there like, why would I ever care about that? Like, come on. Like, yeah.
I don't know. I love this series so far.
So good.
I've already started the third one.
Oh, good.
But I love this series, and so far they've both been 5 stars for me. I think I do like the second one a little bit more, and I think it's just because of art. Honestly, the art makes this book a little more fun.
Yeah, I agree. I really like the dynamic between Art and Murderbot. I think that there was a lot more like philosophical discussion, and overall just like 10 out of 10 on these books. I adore them so much.
Yeah, I'm so far like 4 books into 2023. Met my reading goal of 1, and but 5 stars all around. So I'm on a roll.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Do you have anything else you want to talk about with Artificial Condition?
I don't think so. I'm so excited to read the next book. Cannot wait. I need to figure out how to get the last 2 because I think I only have 4 so far. We're plotting through these, but we do have a special announcement. The votes are in, and we're covering Fonda Lee's the Greenbone saga for season 4. So start thinking about
Jade City.
Jade City, Jade War, and Jade Legacy. They're pretty big books, but they're amazing. They're more modern fantasy. It deals with like crime families in this world where people can use jade to augment their strength and power, and certain people can use jade, certain people can get addicted to jade and not use it in the same way as people can use it to augment their skills. And there is a lot of tumultuousness between two warring factions in the city. I've read the first book. I love the first book. I think we will have so much to discuss with characters and their arcs. I think certain people love certain characters, and you and I usually pick different characters to love, like more than others. We're usually pretty similar on who we hate, but I just think, I know. So everyone think about miniseries names, pick up those books now, because we're really charging through the Murderbot Diaries. We'll of course do an indie mission in between. So we need to start getting those indie missions.
I wasn't sure what we were doing for like the full length novel. We'll probably have to take a little more time for the full length Murderbot novel.
Oh yeah. I forgot that there was like a full length novel. So we'll
have that will obviously take more time than the novellas, but
yes. So we don't know when season 4 is happening, but get those books now, because that would be helpful, and plan and prepare for them. So we're so excited,
because if it's a long book, I gotta buckle up.
I think you'll enjoy them, Laura. So I'm happy it won. It was closely followed by the Locked Tomb series, which is also a very good one. But thank you for everyone who voted.
Thanks for participating.
It was so exciting. There was like a lot of different ones. It didn't go the way I was expecting it to, honestly. I didn't know what way I was expecting it to, but I don't know if I expected it to go the way it did, in a good way. And both of the final 2 were books that I had not initially prepared for our showdowns.
Kind of the one, kind of Greenbone you did. Yeah. Because you weren't going to say it, and then I was like, oh, might as well just throw it in.
Right. So, that was exciting, and we loved everyone who voted for it, and just looking forward to, the next indie mission before that, and finishing up Murderbot. But that's just a little bit of,
that's down the road. Stuff. We've already got that figured out. So,
and so now you guys know
another thing off of our list.
I know, for the new year. So that's exciting.
And we really like it if people would, if you voted, if you would listen and share the podcast and interact with us too. Really like that.
We've met some new friends while we've been covering Murderbot, and it's been a joy. Remember, we do backlog. Our backlogs are perfect for like reassessing or refreshing yourself on a book, because we cover the plot, so it's the perfect refresher. But thanks to everyone, and make sure you're signing up for our Patreon if you want to. We have $3, $5, and $10 levels. People who have a Patreon were allowed an extra vote throughout this entire last round of voting. And so we'll probably do that again with all of our next votes. So that's something to keep in mind. And make sure you're following us on all the other social platforms. We have our Twitter for OWWR Pod at twitter.com. We also have a Hive. We have an Instagram, and we each have personal Instagrams that you guys got to see all over it. So we have.
I'm on Hive too. Check me out on Hive.
And Laura's on Twitter too. So
I'm on Twitter, but I don't use it. My Twitter journey is pretty much over.
So we have all of those great things. And then look at ourpod.com. We have some mini reviews coming out for books that we read that are about to be published, and some other things up there. So make sure you're looking, because we're just making all the content for you guys wherever you want to find us. And thanks everyone. And please join us next week for the 3rd book of the Murderbot Diaries. I don't have the name up for me.
Rogue Protocol.
Rogue Protocol. Thank you, Laura. Join us next week.
I've started it.
Rogue Protocol. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.